Hello, it's Alex from Carringtons Estate Agent in Kingston upon Thames, and today I am joined by the lovely Nicky Hill. Say hi to the people, please, Nicky.
Hello, everybody.
So, just a quick introduction. Nicky probably has the most interesting job to the general public, or at least this is my running theory. Nicky deals on a day-to-day basis with our conveyancing, and today I have some questions from her regarding a rather complex case that I've just done a newsletter about. So, Nicky.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
First of all, tell me in your own words how it was dealing with Parkside and the ridings and all of the subsequent properties that you weren't directly involved with, but you sort of get sucked into.
So we started off by selling the ridings to the owners of Parkside. We then ran our process and sold Parkside to a couple that had a flat to sell. And at the bottom of that chain there was a first-time buyer. All running along smoothly until a survey happened, and we found out that 48 of ridings had foam insulation in the loft area. We at first thought that's not a problem. However, after several conversations with Lloyds Bank at the time, who were the lenders, their criteria was very different on foam insulation for what we understood it to be. In other words, and while a property has foam insulation in the attic, a surveyor cannot give it a value. They can literally tick a box and say it's got foam, no value. Once you have no value, you can't get a mortgage offer. So we proceeded with various options. The first option was the owner of 48 The Ridings had a quote from a roofing company to come and remove the foam. They arrived, went up into the attic and said, "Oh, I can't remove this foam. It's got into the tiles of the roof. It's broken, if you like, the integrity of the roof. If we remove the foam, the roof will either collapse or it will certainly be like a sieve and leaking water." So what we did was we then negotiated a price reduction, and so that the new owners would put on a new roof, and that was negotiated. However, we still had a problem with Lloyds Bank, who at the end of the day, the foam was still there. I think it was you actually that discovered, by doing some Google research, and also bear in mind that the person that had originally installed the foam at 48 The Ridings had a 30-year guarantee. You consequently got in touch with that company, and up came a number to call. If you're having problems with foam insulation, call this number. You went ahead and did that. They gave us advice. His advice right at the start of the process was get rid of the foam, which we had just attempted to do. The first company were Cowboys. They said, okay, we can't remove the foam, but what we can do next week is pull off every single team we've got working on other roofs, and we can install a new roof for you in 3 days, 10 men up on the roof, blah, blah, blah. The new buyer didn't want to do that because they wanted to have time to move into the house, see what it was going to look like, do a loft, etc., etc. Long story short, through the contact that you discovered, we got the foam professionally removed. We got a certificate to say from the foam removal company this has been done correctly, there is no damage to timbers, etc. That was sent to Lloyds Bank. They refused to accept that information. We then had to get a structural engineer to go in and do the same thing, and luckily on this occasion it was a perfect roof, foam insulation done properly, all timbers sound. We then got a mortgage offer. This whole process took, I believe, from about May to December. So it sounds a quick process, but actually every step of the way was another hurdle with the lender. And finally, we, in between Christmas and New Year, we got the mortgage offer. So the first thing we did then was tell all solicitors we're good to go. And we had a firm in the north, not a contact of ours that we hadn't dealt with, who didn't seem to get the urgency that everybody wanted to exchange as quickly as possible, and long story short, it finally exchanged last week.
Fine. You've said that very politically and nicely, I would say, based on what I saw in the last few weeks. So just to digress quickly, I think real quick, the total time, because I keep all of our spreadsheets and information up to date, was just over 9 months from listing those properties to get them under offer through to exchange. So right, I think it was just over 7.5 months of conveyancing time that you had to deal with. Now, we are paid, or we were directly paid on this occasion by the seller of the Ridings and the seller of Parkside for doing the job there.
Yeah.
However, you were and are, in any chain situation, consistently speaking to more than just those two parties, right? They're the predominant parties, but you're having to appease people up and down the chain. In some cases, you're having to manage other agents, the information that they give out, what they're saying. Tell me a little bit about that part of the process and how many hours just updating parties or talking it through with all of these parties takes that isn't actually productive to what it is that you're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Well, purely because of the timescale itself, the first-time buyers at the bottom of the chain, who, in my opinion, must have the patience of a saint, had to get 2 mortgage extensions and finally a brand new mortgage with a different lender because, I don't know, the lender got fed up or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was a 3-step process, of which each time it would have cost them money. Then their buyers, just approaching Christmas, because we suddenly thought, right, it's not going to exchange before Christmas, had to go and get a new mortgage offer. Again, that would have cost them extra money. Then you're dependent on solicitors acting fairly promptly, which is why we do our process. We get everything exchange ready, so there is no delay, if you like. With the solicitors that were actually directly in our chain, we had a change of admin 3 times with one solicitor. One solicitor, from the start of the process in March to the end of the process, never spoke to me once, would not communicate, wouldn't reply to an email, never responded to a phone call. So that again makes any job very hard. She had an assistant who I then discovered wasn't maybe that experienced, had to always get everything signed off, so couldn't actually give you a clear picture of where she was because she was too junior. But also what she didn't realise, that it was within the same office, they were acting one solicitor for the sale and one solicitor for the purchase. They were in an office next door to each other and didn't know. So communication was just appalling. In the end, the only way we could get action was getting the sellers to directly instruct the solicitor step by step as we were moving or trying to move up the chain to get it exchanged, to say, right, it's with this solicitor, this is where it is now, call them. Just such basic stuff you shouldn't have to do. It took 3 attempts to get the chain exchanged, and finally one solicitor in that firm took control of all the files, and we eventually got it exchanged. But that alone could have cost the whole chain, just on timescale, because they didn't realise the urgency, that at any one part, one of those parties could have withdrawn. And subsequently, as it happened, the top of the chain, which is the Ridings to another property, they did pulled out before this had actually exchanged. In the end, because we've gone through this process, he followed our trust and he exchanged anyway on his property. He as yet has to go and find another property, we think. We don't think we can resurrect Couchmore, which wasn't our chain anyway, but that's what happened. And that could have happened with any time because the process took so long.
Yeah. So I think, as you've already said, I think everyone in this chain, to be fair to them in their own right, has had patience of saints. As you say, that first time buyer at the very bottom, that this time element has caused every one of these parties in one way or another emotional stress. Certainly has in the office for us, I'm sure of that. Emotional stress. There has been a monetary element to this as well, whether it be the first time buyer at the bottom who's had to extend and get new mortgages, renegotiations that have come to place that have been backed out on, all of these sorts of things, and the timing element of it, as you say, at any one point anyone could have pulled out. And in fact, I think in the office myself, due to external factors such as the budget, which happened, when was it, late November in the end, there were discussions then around if it doesn't happen at this point, then we'll be pulling out, etc., etc. There was certainly frustration from buyers further down the chain that we were directly involved with in Parkside, and rightly so. They wanted updates and felt like we were, but even we had got to a point where it was like we can just keep talking about the same thing over and over again, but the reality is we don't have an answer for you until we have a solution. So we're going to waste half an hour, 45 minutes. I think we even had to have that conversation at one point and apologise. And again, what we're looking to do throughout this process is learn. I don't think any of us in this office sit in a position that we did a few years ago where we go, well, we know better and we know what we're doing. I think the most that this new process has taught us is that from every transaction like this one, we need to look at ourselves, hold ourselves accountable on what we can change and what we can do differently. And even halfway through that process, we said, when you're speaking to the buyers, just be honest about the situation. And if they're going to pull out or people are going to, so be it. We can't control that. We can only give them the truth. So a massive thank you to everyone involved in that chain for the patience. And I think it also goes to show that selecting the right buyer is often important as well, because every one of these parties must have loved the property that they were holding out for. But any number of months that it continued, it could have quite comfortably all fallen apart and cost tens of thousands for everyone involved. Another thing that I wanted to discuss with you, you haven't mentioned any names there, and you've given a bit of a brief overview on the politics of solicitors. Most commonly, I would say, you have a very high up solicitor or well qualified solicitor that's well versed in the sort of more corporate generic world, and then they have underlings, trainees, teams of. So you may have a solicitor that deals with 100 cases that's then divvied out to a team of 3 or 4. And that's just one element that we're aware of where communication can be slowed up, right? Because as you say, if you're speaking directly to the name on the file of the trainee solicitor that you've got, and they have no authority or power to actually sign off on anything, you're waiting a day at a time for every bit of communication that you're speaking to.
I think you're lucky if it's a day at a time. Some of these corporates will say we will not get back to you for 3 days. And in that time, anything could happen. So it's a lot longer than that.
Yeah, and I think this goes for the real world as well. Generally speaking, it's not as cut and dry as this, but be really careful with the advice I give to the general public. But generally speaking, you get what you pay for.
Yes.
So, and it makes sense, right? If you're incentivized as a seller, as an agent, and you're getting a higher fee for something, you're naturally going to be more drawn towards the higher paying outcome. In the same way, there are certain solicitors out there that demand a higher fee, but will call you back on the hour or prioritise your file ahead of everybody else. And I think my word of warning that you can maybe back up on this is conveyancers or solicitors that look great value for money are more often than not probably very overstretched with very poor communication processes that makes it very difficult for your agent, even difficult for you as the seller or the buyer to get in touch with, and can actually derail the whole process. So coming back to what you said earlier, Nicky, our process now, I don't want to dive into the hows of what we do too much, but this property, or these 2 properties, it's important to note we're at the very beginning of our changeover in our process, and are actually one of the stigma reasons as to why we have changed every property that we bring on to date, to avoid problems like this. And I think for us, the learning curve, or certainly part of this, you've got to sort of experience it for it to happen. The spray foam thing was nothing that we knew.
First time I've ever come across it.
And I know that there'll be people out there that will go, oh, you should receive regular training, and there may be corporate agents out there that do regular updates on training, but I can tell you right now, this was so opinionated and so difficult to get to the bottom of what's the right or wrong here. You mentioned earlier, what I found online was effectively a government website that said, oh, by the way, this was all changed in legislation behind the scenes, and by luck found that company that said, we deal with this is what I do every single day. I deal with 5 to 6 properties that are about to fall through because none of their lenders will lend on spray foam. And I don't say that to just scare the general public.
No, I mean, I think I've done so much more research now on spray foam that without qualifications, I'd probably consider myself a bit of an expert. But it's straightforward. If we had to do this again, it's straightforward. You'd know straight away what to do. But I didn't realise the industry as a whole is such a cowboy industry, and it's grown up since the government have changed their policy.
Chances everywhere.
Chances everywhere. I mean, the quotes, I'm talking about an average roof. To get someone to do this foam removal properly, you're probably talking about £4,000 plus. The first quote that came along that the client had got was £800. That now would be huge alarm bells to everyone else. And you might think, oh, price it, what they do, they're just taking off foam. There's a lot more to it than that, for example. Yes, it's quite staggering.
But this is it. If you don't mind me asking, Nicky, not to reveal too much, but how long do you think you've been handling your own cases to one degree or another? How long have you been doing the conveyancing process here at Carringtons or beyond that in your career? How many years do you have experience?
5-6 years. Yeah.
Fair enough. And I think in that time of us doing conveyancing, legals, it's, as I say, none of us in the office knew about this. It's a big change. Now we can inform the general public, anyone who has, again, not to raise alarm bells or panic you, but if you're thinking about selling or buying a property and you see spray foam, it's something that we're more than happy to help with.
No, don't come to me. No,
yeah. But yeah, it's a huge learning curve for us, but I think most importantly, the way we now structure our properties and set them up to be exchange ready is just a way more simplistic way of dealing with it, dealing with stuff up front before, being proactive to issues as opposed to reactive.
Yeah.
Because it's cost us a lot of time, energy, and frankly, money. You spent
hours and hours,
days and days and days on
Yeah.
that for almost 9 months worth of work, which just doesn't make sense to do. It's not sustainable, and that's the way the general industry is set up. And do you have any thoughts on? I'm trying to think. There was one other thing that happened in the process that I remember. So you already mentioned Lloyd's, because this will undoubtedly be another question that the general public has. With the government's legislation and what we've now learned, it's probably not just Lloyd's, right? It's a majority of panels and lenders, if not all.
What we did, in fact, was once we had a foam removal certificate saying it's been removed, there was no guarantee given that Lloyd's would lend. And this was the one big worry that obviously the buyers had. It was only that you had to go through the process. So you had to submit each report as it came along. Final report being the structural engineer. It couldn't have been any other type of surveyor. They wouldn't accept it. It was only a structural engineer. And until they had that report and told us yes, they would accept, it was still hanging in the balance right the way through. So now I would approach it very differently, because if someone had foam and they get a no value, it's a red flag to all lenders. No, once you give your valuation in as I can't give this a value, they just what no one will lend. And even though some specialist lenders say we will look at each case individually, it would still have to get to that point where this roof is deemed, or the timber's deemed, to be solid and support the roof. That's it. That's essentially it.
Yeah.
And only a structural engineer can probably give you that information. And again, there's a cost involved. There's a cost involved to removing the foam, to getting a structural engineer to come and report. We did have, in fact, one surveyor in between the structural engineer and this, who went round the roof. It was all sound, moved his meter over 4 foot, and there was a bit of moisture reading. And any roof could have moisture reading, but because we're talking about a corporate, it would have had a tick box across and failed the report. That's how. And it's not just corporate lending, actually. I'm using Lloyd's because they are a big corporate, but any red flag it's just a tick box, and it's a no in their world, because it's not. You can't get around this system of it's got to tick all of these boxes, and that's how it works.
That's the process.
Yeah.
And it's all to do with value, isn't it?
Yeah.
As you say, it's them being able to, because to simplify this, I guess, for buyers and sellers who might not quite understand, thinking it's my money, all the bank really cares about is if they had to reclaim that property, how quickly can they get their money back out of it? They care about the value of the property.
They care about the value of the property, but what I discovered was even with a very high deposit loan to value, they still wouldn't have taken the risk.
Yeah, that's my point, is that
Yeah.
they care about their money that's potentially
Yeah.
trapped in a property,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
if they deem any risk to that, anything that would stop them from a quick, easy sale to the open market, we're not interested.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of buyers and sellers are unaware of that fact, that they think it's their money because of the decision in principle and I'm the one paying it back.
Yeah.
They look at things in a very black and white manner. They
Yeah.
treat it as though if you
Yeah.
both lost your job tomorrow, we would want our money out of that property as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And sorry, you actually reminded me of the other thing. You said about the structural engineer's report.
Mm.
I seem to remember even getting to the stage of deciding who or what that structural engineer's report was took a good
Just to find
10
one.
days, if I remember correctly, to actually understand what it was that Lloyd's wanted
Yeah.
specifically,
Yeah.
as opposed to rushing into something that then would be wrong. So I think we had our hands burnt on that a little bit, and
Yeah. We'd already had a surveyor who was it Ricks or F Ricks, and that. So, and originally the survey that was done that actually gave it an OK bill of health, that was an ex-Ricks surveyor. The bank wouldn't accept that. It had to be structural engineer to compute the load, I suppose, and how safe the timbers were.
Right, well, I hope you enjoyed that video. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions and don't want to give personal information away, feel free to comment down below on whatever platform you are watching, and we'll happily try and reply when we have some time. If you want a more detailed conversation with Nicky, the self-proclaimed expert on spray foam, or are looking to buy or sell in the general Kingston and surrounding areas, we'd be more than happy to help in any capacity, even if it's just something you're thinking about. We're here to help. As we learn from any of these processes, we're going to try and educate the public as much as possible. So do be aware if buying or selling about spray foam. It was a situation that changed 2021, 22 with the government, that has gone sort of under the radar, I think, to a lot of people. So do get in contact if you need any help. And thank you, Nicky, very much for your time, and we'll be having you back on for more talks about conveyancing nightmares in the future.
Thank you.
Cool.